All right. Let me introduce myself. I'm Karen Lazan, the District 2 Advanced Training Committee Chair. I am really looking forward to this training tonight because I have to say, I know nothing about this subject. So I'm very excited to have this as part of our offerings. We have two presenters tonight, Brian Poppe and Erin Poppe. Brian is the current president for Early Risers Toastmasters in Mount Vernon, Washington. He has also served as the Vice President Education. He is an architect and partner at HKP Architects, also in Mount Vernon. He has been at HKP since graduating from Kansas State University nearly 30 years ago. He's an avid motorcyclist, having ridden with his wife to San Francisco and back just a month ago. 3 years ago, however, he and two friends rode to Anchorage and back, which is a 6,000-mile round trip. He is very proud of their two children, one of which you're about to meet. And that's Erin. She is an organizational development consultant at Gallup Certified Clifton Strengths Coach. Oh, I'm sorry, I think I said that wrong, Erin. And a Gallup Certified Clifton Strengths Coach. She's been an active member in the Early Risers at Mount Vernon Toastmasters Club for 2 years, and it is its current Sergeant at Arms. Of the many reasons she's grateful for being in Toastmasters, what tops the list is the chance to learn and grow alongside her dad, Brian, even though they live nearly 2,000 miles apart. Please welcome Brian and Erin with "We Were Hybrid Before Hybrid Was Cool."
Thank you very much, Karen. And good evening, and thank you all for spending an hour of your precious evenings with us. I am Brian Poppe, and as you've heard, this is my daughter, Erin. And we want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to share our path for becoming a hybrid club. We've set aside 35 minutes for this presentation and 15 or more minutes at the end for question and answer. In these 55 minutes, we'll share with you a brief history of our club, why we needed to change, what we changed, some thoughts on how you can start going hybrid yourself, and any answers we may have to your questions. And now then, on to the show. A brief history of Early Risers as I remember it. And I understand there are most likely many people here that have more history than I with Early Risers. But I started 4 years ago with Early Risers, and we were meeting in the downtown Mount Vernon Senior Center at 6:30 in the morning. As you can imagine, times like this in the calendar, they were dark and cold. It's not a very well lit street. And oh, by the way, the Senior Center happens to be a 1930s classroom or a school building. We had 12 to 14 members, sometimes less, sometimes more. But we needed to change, and we knew it. We needed to change to survive. We had difficulty recruiting members. We even had difficulty retaining members. You can imagine 6:30 in the morning, every Tuesday, in a converted 1930s classroom, didn't really give the image of Toastmasters embracing the needs of a modern society. We had no control over our space. Not only was the X classroom right next to the still functioning kitchen, but it was entirely under control of the volunteer organizations that were taking care of the building. So one morning we showed up and there was paint drop cloths on the floor. You did notice a little difference here, right? The next week, the walls were painted dark blue. The window trim, unexplainably, was painted baby blue. And the window itself was painted this weird wine red color. A month later, a commercial refrigerator showed up in the room because the refrigerator in the kitchen was no longer functioning, and it was easier to put a new refrigerator in our space while they figured out how to work on getting the old one out of the kitchen. Now, this wasn't just any refrigerator. It was commercial grade. It was stainless steel. It was bulletproof. It was 7 feet tall, 5 feet wide, 3 foot deep. And at the most inopportune times, the compressor would kick off and drown out anybody that was speaking. We had no control over our space. We were not showing ourselves to be something where somebody wanted to be part of our club. But our president at the time had a vision, and that was of the club achieving distinguished status. No one could remember when that had happened last. I certainly couldn't, and well, I won't call them the old timers, but people there longer than I couldn't remember the last time it had happened either. And the chief sticking point was membership. We'll never get to 20 members. We'll never get to 20 members will never happen. There's lots of negativity. And quite frankly, I bought into it too. We knew we needed to change to survive. We needed to change to retain our members. We needed to change to attract new members. And we needed to change to say, no, make that become relevant in an increasingly digital world. We had to embrace technology, not only for ourselves, but for our members. Our members were out there in the digital world. And keep in mind, this is before COVID, they were engaging in online meetings through Zoom or Skype for Business. Remember that? Not only were they doing remote meetings, they were holding remote interviews of people applying for job positions. They were participating in online interviews for themselves, pursuing other jobs. Be relevant for our members, we needed to change so that we could help them be relevant in this world. So a new strategy for early risers emerged. And that was that we would become a hybrid club.
Now, before we got to that place of deciding to go hybrid, I will say my dad implemented another recruitment strategy, which was telling his daughter visiting from grad school that, hey, I go to this meeting on Tuesday mornings at 6:30. Do you want to come to one? I said, oh, sure. I am not here very often, and I would love to see what my dad does with his time. So I joined for that first meeting and had a good time. Again, it was 6:30 in the morning. I live in Kansas City, everyone. That is Central Time Zone, and that is 2 hours past you. So thankfully, at least that transition made it a little easier for me to wake up before the sun got up. for those days, but it became the routine. Anytime I was home, Tuesday mornings, I would hop in the truck with Dad and go to Toastmasters as a guest. I gave a couple of speeches. I did a few of the table topics, but mainly I was just there to sit and listen and learn from the wealth of experience in the room. Until one day, when Dad and I got there early to set up the space, as he was often one to do. And in that space, I will say early risers had the gift of breakfast food. That was another pull-in. If you need help getting people in the door, offer them free food. Because every meeting there were breakfast pastries, there were apples, there were bananas, there was coffee. And as we were setting up the meeting space this time, I remember I was holding a plate of pastries. And as I was walking from one table to the next, my dad's asked a question seemingly to the open room. Now, I've never actually asked him this, if this was intentional, if he was trying to spark my brain into what you see here, because he knows me so well, but you so innocently asked out loud, I wonder what it would take to boost our membership. And I remember that moment of just kind of stopping in my place with the plate of pastry still in my hand and go, can I use that chalkboard, Dad? He goes, go for it. In that very knowing voice of, I know what I've just done. So I set down the plate of pastries, I ran to the board, and I can't tell you how much time flew by. It felt like seconds. I'm sure it was at least 5 minutes. But before I knew it, between the time of setting down that pastry and the first member walking in the door, we had this. And it wasn't labeled like you see now with the S1, S2s. I'll tell you what that means in a second. But what I had there, starting in that far left side of the board, thank you, Dad, for pointing that out, the low membership challenge. Now, I love to brainstorm. I've often told people one of my ideal jobs in this world would be to sit in one spot, be hooked up to a computer, someone gives me a prompt, and I just generate ideas. And that would be my job. I would get a break for lunch. I would go home at the end of the day and I'd come back and do it all again tomorrow. And that's kind of what I got to do here. I just let my brain spill all the ideas out onto the bulletin board. And by the time members started filtering in for the day, it was decided that we were going to have a discussion over opportunities for solving low membership. Now, like Karen said, I am an organizational development consultant for my full-time job, and that is just a really long-winded way of saying I like helping people and teams be better. So in order to help early risers Toastmasters, remember not being a member at the time, I especially knew it wasn't my decision to make. I certainly had a lot of ideas to offer. I certainly had some expertise with going online or connecting with, high school students or college students, breaking the membership barriers, as it were. But ultimately, the decision was not mine, and the solution could not be chosen by me. So what followed was roughly, I would say solidly a 45 minute discussion where I sat on a chair next to the bulletin or next to the blackboard and answered any questions people might have, prompted new thoughts, but for the most part, they ran with it. And on their own decided that in the order you see here, the number one solution was going virtual. And we talked through why that would actually benefit the club. We talked through what were the needs, what were the barriers, what were the opportunities? Because that's what we were there to solve, was what can we do, not what can't we do. And that's what led us to deciding that going virtual, going hybrid was the best option for us.
So what did we change? Well, we changed just about everything. And what we learned was that what we were wanting to become was a hybrid club. And that we needed to rebrand ourselves to allow for hybrid meetings. But the truth is, we didn't even know that that was the name then. And honestly, I don't know that Toastmasters International knew that that's what the name was either, because I looked and they didn't have a manual for us to follow. Keep in mind, this, again, was a year before COVID. So we knew we needed a new location. We knew we needed to actively embrace technology for ourselves and for our members. But we knew that in doing so, we could draw in new member types. We could draw in people who had early mornings, but couldn't be somewhere else. And top of that list were parents with school-age kids. Because if you're meeting at 6:30 in the morning and that happens to be the same time that the kids need to get out the door to get to the bus to go to school, you're going to lose that battle with where the time gets devoted. We knew that this would align with travelers, both personal and business travelers. Members could attend from the road, wherever that may be. There was no need to be here to be here. And we also knew this would align with snowbirds. They could attend here in person, and then when they took off for warmer climates, they could still attend, and we wouldn't lose them as a member. So we found a new location. It was a meeting room for a local economic development agency. It was a professional location. It was a bigger capacity room. It was a much better environment, and it overlapped with their mission. Their mission was promoting local businesses, working with local entrepreneurs. Our mission was better public speaking and leadership. Sure seemed like a perfect opportunity for cross-pollination. The space embraced technology. There was high-speed wired and wireless internet. There was a video projector with a screen and laptop that they let us use. And there were in-room speakers. What did we struggle with in making this change? In a phrase, resistance to rapid change. We had limited control to change the space. We essentially had to leave it as is. We had limited time to make changes in our operations. And quite frankly, we had members that just didn't want to change with the club. We had one person come up to Erin during a meeting and kind of lean in a little close and go, you know, not all change is good. But I would beg to disagree. Well, let me back that up. He's right, not all change is good, but this change was good. And I have a feeling that many of you are attending tonight because you're facing these challenges too. This was a year before COVID. And like many of you, we were building the airplane while flying it. We were learning our way. And thankfully, and here's one of the challenges, is that we do have our meeting space by the train, and Scotia will remember that. Thankfully, this transition did not happen during COVID. We had the opportunity to still meet in person, to work with our members, to work through the transition of becoming a hybrid club. We didn't have to immediately shut out the lights, send people home, and figure out how to be an online only club. What did we learn? We learned that the internet matters, surprisingly. And I'll have Erin speak to some of the digital side of these changes.
Absolutely. So like Dad said, as they were figuring out how to make the transition in person from the senior center over to this new space, it was on me to figure out how are we going to start incorporating that digital space at the same time. And we did learn that internet matters, not just in the room there, but in every room that a member is coming in from. We had to figure out how to help people, especially those that weren't readily knowledgeable or accessible around this sort of technology. How do we catch them up? How do we train each one of us dependent on where we're starting so that no matter whether they could come in person for a club meeting, or they can do what I'm doing right now and chime in from their home office, you can still be an active member. And in order to do that, you need solid internet. So we did a lot of effort early on into making sure that people who are going to lean on these remote opportunities had what they needed in order to connect to the fullest. And part of that too was understanding all of the basic necessities around plugging in. Because it's not just having access to wireless internet or an Ethernet cable. You need to have a laptop that can handle the programs we were using, like Zoom here today. You needed to have microphones and cameras that allowed you to actually meaningfully connect rather than just being a fly on the wall. And we realized as we were going through so many of these needs that both we had as a club and that each of our members had, we realized that, like Dad said, there's no manual for this. There was no path already trotted for us to follow, for us to be able to know and watch out for any pitfalls or obstacles that might be in our way. So we decided to make a shift. Yes, we still had the sergeant at arms in person. They were definitely still responsible for setting up that welcoming environment in the room, but we decided to also supplement in a digital sergeant at arms. And wouldn't you know it, that was me. My job was to make sure that the Zoom connections, the activities we did, whatever it was in tandem with what was happening in the room, which did mean, like my dad mentioned, changing up some of our practices and traditions. Like, how do you vote for best speaker, best table topics, best evaluator when not everyone is in the room to place a physical vote? How do you give awards to people who can't be there to physically receive it and get their picture taken with it? There were a lot of things that we had to think through. Internet was the start, but as we built out this process, as we got further and further down the path, we realized just how many opportunities there were for us as a club, as a team, to tackle this challenge together successfully. And one of those big challenges, I'll pass it back to my dad to cover, is how we set up the rooms to remain inclusive to everyone in and outside of it.
Erin's absolutely right. On the physical side, we had to learn how to break our mindset from an in-person presentation environment to a space that accommodated virtual attendees. And the first step was taking stock of the space. What could we change? What could we not change? We could change tables and chairs as long as we put them back. We could use the lectern and change its location as long as we put it back. We could play around with the front of the room to a degree, but what really anchored it in our minds to start with is what we couldn't change, and that was the location of the projector and the screen. In our mind, that is what set the front of the room, because that's a typical presentation environment. You have a podium and you have a screen next to the podium where the presenter can make their visual aids supplement their speech. So we played around with room layouts, and this was purely trial and error. We tried lines. We had all the tables in a line, almost in a classroom setting with the sage on the stage in front of the screen. We tried circles, where we could draw the wagons together for protection. But again, both of these versions turn the screen into a one-dimensional element. It was only seen as there to supplement the presenter. Now, it totally worked when the presenter was on Zoom because you're already looking at the screen. But if you're presenting in front of a screen, do you really want a giant floating head on the wall behind you? Because what we learned is that nobody wants to present in front of the Wizard of Oz. No matter what, if you're presenting in front of a screen and you expect the screen to be how your members that aren't there are interacting, they're going to be this floating disembodied head on the wall. And that's not a good look behind a speaker. So we made a change. We took that circle and broke it. We straightened it out into a C shape, and we turned the screen into the fourth side of that seating arrangement. And we moved the podium to what was the side. And we learned it's not a great hardship for the speaker to use a screen on the side of the room for presentation. They can turn their head and look. And people in the audience can turn their head and look. It's not a hardship. And by putting the screen at the end, the people on the screen are attendees, they are participants. They are not visitors, they're not observers, they are active participants, whether they're giving a speech, whether it's table topics or an evaluation. By including the screen in your seating arrangement and not putting somebody in front of the screen, you bring those visitors in and they are felt as if they are part of that physical space. And one of the other keys that we learned was, and we encourage, is bring your own device. Typically, we will try to have 2 to 3 people bring in a laptop, and they will log into the Zoom meeting. They'll have their microphone off, but they'll have their video on. And that gives the people who are not attending multiple cameras by which to observe the meeting. They can choose camera 1, camera 2, camera 3. Whatever angle helps them best see what's going on, helps them feel like they're part of the experience of that meeting. But that was our light bulb moment. We needed to think of people on the screen as someone who is always attending, but only occasionally speaking. Now, have we figured it all out? No. Audio is still our Achilles heel. We haven't figured audio out yet. Having a remote mic works to bring audio in for the rest of the room, but it's not as effective as we want it to be for people being remote. That's our continual challenge. So these are several items of how we have changed. And we're now nearly 3 years later. Again, we started this a year before COVID. We've learned our lessons and continue to. We've learned that the internet matters. But we've also learned that physical space matters. We've learned that tech accessibility varies. We've also learned that tech knowledge varies. And as such, training is going to need to be an ongoing effort. For transforming the club, on the online side, we now have members from all around the world. Well, not exactly. I'll back up the superlative. What we have are 2 new members that would have never been a member in our previous life. We have Erin, who attends regularly from her home in Kansas City. And we have Daria, who several of you met through the speech contest, and she attends from her home in Barbados. And our previous treasurer is now attending from his new home in South Dakota. And last year, in the middle of COVID, we did achieve select distinguished status for our club. As part of this whole transition, and as part of her role as the digital sergeant at arms, Erin created an early risers digital meeting manual.
And this was created again in the effort of, at the time, being a digital sergeant at arms, capturing the knowledge I was actively collecting through this pathfinding process and making it very easy for anyone else who wanted to step into that role at some point, or anyone who was transitioning into that hybrid or remote format, make it just easier on them. And I promise you, the way my brain works, this is as thorough as it can possibly be in terms of exactly what you need to do and how and when. If you're in person, days before the meeting, the day of the meeting, anything we could think of. But like my dad said, we're still learning. This is a living, breathing document. We did not have something like this roughly 3 years ago, December 18th, 2018, when we decided to start down this journey. So this document grows with us. It will continuously be added to as we decide what elements of hybrid, of remote, of in-person do we want to keep? Do we want to set aside? How are we going to be better than ever every time, every week we get together? And with this digital meeting manual, we also realized, as many of the clubs have, as we heard in the district and club role training not too long ago, that there's no longer a need for a digital sergeant at arms, because the sergeant at arms role is now encompassing this. It is now charged with making virtual meeting spaces just as welcoming as they would be in person. So there's a lot of efforts we have to go in that. And like Dad said, certainly when we return to that hybrid format and not just remote, there are challenges we still need to work out. One of the ideas we had for solving the tech or the audio problem was getting clip-on mics that speakers could wear to make the audio just that much more clear for the people at home. But again, once we try that, we may decide we don't like it. We might try something else, and then we might try something else, and then we might try something else. And that's okay. The whole point of this is that every time we try, we get a little bit better than before.
And as Erin noted, and as you've heard with COVID, like many of you, we had to go to full online meetings. We were no longer just hybrid. But we had this background to help us with that transition. After COVID, we'll likely continue as hybrid, and you can too. There are several questions to go through as you transition to hybrid meetings. You have to take inventory of your physical space. How much control do you have over your meeting space? What can you change? What can't you change? Can your club afford the costs of acquiring new or upgraded equipment? Can you negotiate with the meeting room owner for some permanent changes? Right now, we're in the process of working with our building owner for the audio upgrades and upgrading the overall AV system in the room. That may be something that our club tackles as a donation or some sort of in-kind contribution to make our contribution felt for making our space better. In the online space, the questions that you need to go through include what platform is best for your members and your club needs. Looking at the surveys before the meeting, Zoom is 100% of the answers that were given. Some of you were, not wanting to tip your hand as to what you use, but of those who wanted to share, Zoom was 100%. But that was a problem for us. We still continued with Zoom, but Zoom a year ago was deemed a security risk by some organizations. And that cost us at least one member. They were a part of a local government agency, and the word came down from upon high that Zoom is a security risk and will not be allowed on their intranet or on any corporate or owner furnished equipment. So we lost that member. It does happen, and it can matter. You need to determine how you will accommodate different levels of technology, accessibility, and varying levels of knowledge. And how will your club members and traditions need to change? Finally, here are 7 steps that we've determined for becoming a hybrid club. First, figure out the why. Work with your club to determine why this change is needed. You need that buy-in, because if you don't have it, you're not going to have the support that you need to work through this change. Assess your current technological capabilities and needs. Evaluate the accessibility of your space for technology. Allocate or generate club funds to cover any technology upgrades or ongoing subscriptions. Determine how you need to rearrange your space to seamlessly incorporate technology. Create a transition and technology guide for current and new members. The questions that each of those groups have are going to be different, and it's good to be prepared with the answers. And finally, celebrate your club's transition often. Change is more comfortable as it becomes accepted. And with that, I'd like to turn the mic over to Erin so that she can read through the questions that have been filed by chat. And once we get through those, we'll open it up to the floor for any other questions. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Dad. You did a great job. Okay, so bringing us back into the Q&A. Again, this is our time to answer the questions you submitted via the chat. And once we are done running through what was submitted, we'll open the floor to any that just come off the cuff, off your brain. So the very first one was, please detail that technical setup. And I believe Dad did a pretty good job of that when he was going through those floor plans, but just to give a little more context, there we go, perfect. So just as a reminder, remember the technical setup was the ultimate goal. We had to wrap people in to the room, even if they were telecommuting in via webcam. So that is why we made the C shape, made the screen the end of that table so that anyone, wherever they were joining, felt like they were a part of what was happening. And as you can see on this diagram here, those 3 little red lines accompanied by sets of arrows, those were different webcams and laptops with webcams that we had set up in place so that not only did we get a view of the entire room, not only were we able to toggle and specifically look at the speaker while they were talking, but we were able to engage with people. Others were able to come up to the camera, have conversations with us while we were setting up the meeting room, while we were waiting to begin. We were able to do little breakout conversations like during our open house, which on one of the other slides there was a photo of. We actually broke apart some of those laptops so that small groups could have conversations together. We also made sure, yep, there it is, up in that left-hand corner there. We also made sure, like Dad said, to have microphones, and this is a challenge we're still working on. Highly recommend, if you're going to do this, getting an omnidirectional microphone. That is a microphone that will pick up all the sound in the room. It does come with its challenges though, like if a train is running by just half a block away, it's going to pick it up real clearly. However, it gives you a chance to at least, again, be a part of the conversation. We do want to get some speaker mics when we return to this hybrid format to make that even more clear. And even so, that will require more technology mindfulness as we connect multiple microphones to the same Zoom account. And that was another thing we learned that I can't remember off the top of my head, but technological setup absolutely needed. You need a pro Zoom account or whatever it was that you're planning on using. It needs to be at a level where you have complete control over if you can record, how long the meetings can last, what permissions do you give participants. As you as a host, are you able to mute? Are you able to share screen? There's so many other considerations we had to take when choosing which platform was right for us. And thankfully Zoom has held up the test of time, at least for 3 years in a pandemic. So we'll keep going with it for now. Dad, anything you want to add to question number 1?
One thing that I would add is here's the podium or lectern, as we keep getting corrected, that we've been using. And it's been very handy in that all of the technology that we use can be held within this one piece of locking furniture. So when we're done, the laptop gets folded up, the presenter tool gets put away, the microphone gets moved into the bottom, everything gets shut and locked, and then it gets rolled into the meeting room storage area that we're able to claim for ourselves. So in this one compact device, we're able to quickly set up the room, roll the podium out, unlock it, open it up, plug it into the video projector, set the microphone out, The one thing that I will suggest is that even though the laptop is wireless, we have it wired into the internet. And we do that specifically so that the Wi-Fi bandwidth is free and available for the other members in the room to use with their mobile devices or those supplemental cameras or supplemental laptops. By keeping the presenter's laptop on the wired internet, we're not impacting that Wi-Fi bandwidth.
And one question did just pop into me privately. Any issues with using one Wi-Fi connection for 3 to 4 Zoom laptops, using it simultaneously? And I think Dad mentioned that right there, that yes, there are issues when you have multiple pieces of equipment logging onto the Wi-Fi. And there were lags that we had to deal with. There was gap in connectivity, but what we found was that at least by plugging in the host laptop, the main one that we wanted to use as a view for the room, as the main communication for Dad and I, because we would often be chatting each other via Zoom during these meetings, trying to get things set up or get things figured out. As long as that was connected via Ethernet, we were good. But certainly those are challenges to keep in mind of how strong is your Wi-Fi connection? How many devices can leech onto it without completely cutting it off? Great questions, everyone.
And I think that's, like we keep harping on, internet matters, bandwidth matters. And it's not only for information flowing in, but it's going to impact the quality and the level of enjoyment for your virtual attendees. If everybody shows up at 6:30 in the morning just to watch some pixelated little square on their screen that keeps dropping out, that's not a recipe for recruiting new members and for keeping your current ones.
Like that.
One of the things that I was going to see if Erin could dig into a little bit as well is learning how to do online voting and polling.
We can definitely talk about that. Let's loop back around though, as we move through some of these other questions that have come in through the Q&A while the time we have.
Sure.
So the second one was, what did you learn during 2020 and how does your setup today compare to the original setup? Did you change anything? And first answer, simple answer is yes, we did change because we're all remote right now. We don't have this in-person setup at our disposal, and we're not doing in-person meetings at the moment. Although we do have full intended plans to go back to a hybrid format once it's safe for people to rejoin in person again. But in terms of the setup, the main thing that changed was that we had to be even more intentional and mindful about what equipment, what accessibility people had at home. Because there were people who also didn't have laptops that had webcams and cameras attached to them, so they were logging in via phone. And that made it hard for voting. That made it hard to communicate with them in the chat if something was going wrong or if they needed to know extra information. So that was certainly something we had to adapt to during COVID, along with everyone else, is how do we go from hybrid to completely remote? Dad, anything you'd add there?
I think the one quick anecdote that I would add to that, and it falls back to the Sergeant at Arms facilitating the meeting, is when people are logging in by their phone, they may not notice whether or not they're muted. And random noises during a meeting can pull focus from others in the meeting. So I would suggest that your digital sergeant at arms is active and engaged in their laptop, whether it's an entirely virtual meeting or a hybrid meeting. So they're quick on the draw for keeping everyone muted that should be. And honestly, that also means quickly unmuting people who didn't realize that they've been muted.
I think one of my favorites is whenever someone's logging on, especially via phone, because that can have some of its own difficulties there, but all of a sudden you just hear like muffled grumbling of, what is this? I can't figure this out. What is happening? And just quickly trying to mute that before it interrupts the speech. But we get it figured out. We do.
It's a process.
Yeah. Always learning, always growing. All right, question 3, what type of mic are we using to give the audience audio? One that pulls in sound from everywhere or one that is quite directional? In general, I would say if it's in person, yet an omnidirectional mic, I'm going to post an equipment list here in the chat in just a little bit when we get to that question that asks for an equipment list. So that's the very short answer. If you're in person, if you have hybrid, if people are in all areas of the room, get something omnidirectional. My favorite, and I'm not going to mess with the setup right now for fear of ruining it all, but a blue Yeti mic is what I have currently attached to my desk. And it is so useful because not only does it have an omnidirectional setting, it also has a mono setting. So if I am just talking directly into the mic, it will only pick up what I have to say and nothing around me. And some other features that are fun to play with, but I won't muddle the waters right now with them now. All you need to know is that when you are doing hybrid, get an omnidirectional mic. If you are at home, I recommend getting something with that mono feature so that it can help drown out the excess noise. Of course, Zoom now has some recent updates like background noise suppressants. If you haven't played with that function already, you will find it in your audio settings, and it is really, really nice, especially if you're like me, someone who likes to type up notes as we go. No one will hear the click clacking away of you keeping up any longer. So that's really helpful, but that's what I would say for the mics. And then consider too, depending on how big your in-person meeting space is, if you need to get things like clip-on mics for the speakers as well. Anything to add, Dad, or good to move on? Wonderful. All right, number 4, it sounds like you use a projector. Is there a solution without a projector? I would say if you are in person, then other options outside of a projector would be a external computer monitor, like what I have right now. It's something I can connect my laptops to, but it's not connected to a sedentary computer. You can move it carefully, but ultimately something big enough that people can actually see the face on the screen. It's also perfectly acceptable, especially if the room is a little more small, more intimate, setting up a series of laptops and then pinning or spotlighting a speaker or attendee on each one so that each person has their own floating head on a screen. So you can add to the room like that. It does take more equipment. It takes some collaboration. And one big question that keeps getting brought up right now that we're going to definitely address more directly is, well, what if you don't have technology? What if you don't have a projector or a screen or additional laptops? And short answer being, the kindness of your club helps out a lot. Like Dad said, we asked people to bring in their own laptops. We asked people to donate equipment they were using. And we did have to think through, if we have to make upgrades, how are we going to ask our members for support? Are we going to do a fundraiser out in the community? Are we going to do a donation drive internally? Are we going to reach out to district or other Toastmaster leadership and say, hey, what support do local clubs have for going remote during COVID? Whatever the case was, we knew we had to be industrious in bringing to the table solutions that didn't drain all of our bank accounts from equipping every single room we were in with the fully updated tech. That wasn't going to happen. But certainly there were a lot of opportunities inherently in the kindness of our members and in the ingenuity of them as well, that we could come up with some pretty cool solutions.
And I think real quick that I would add to that is, it's part of assessing your space. If you're fortunate enough to have a meeting space that has a flat panel display on the wall, wonderful. The benefit there is you can walk in front of it and you're not walking in front of a projector and throwing a shadow on the wall. The downside is, as you can see in this image, the projection screen is about 7 feet wide. Get that same display area out of a flat panel display is a significant investment. And it's would be a conversation that you would have with the building owner. There are audio-visual guidelines online that will tell you from a certain depth of viewing how far you are from the screen, how big the screen needs to be. So if we were to walk into this space that you see in the slide and there was a 50-inch flat screen on the wall, that looks nice. It's not functional for what we needed. It's not functional for that space having a large presentation. For a room of this size, we need a substantial screen, or we need to have multiple screens around the room. Again, getting back to that distance of viewer to screen.
Absolutely. All right, we are just about to hit that 9:30 mark, so I know we have more questions. Like we said, Dad and I are going to hang out and answer some more. One last thing I will drop into the chat, since this has been asked for repeatedly during the Q&A, is a list of equipment. So this is what's in the manual. We have remote tools listed out there, as well as tools we found extraordinarily helpful for going hybrid. In our guide as well, we have links to various external how-to guides on how to set them up, what microphone is best for you, things like that we can source out to our club as they need. But thank you everyone for your time today. Thank you so much for having us, and I'm going to pass it back over to Karen to wrap us up.
Thank you very much. Thanks to both Erin and Brian, and we're not going anywhere, but if you have to go, you know, I realize that we said 7:30 and we're going to continue recording, so you'll be able to catch it if you must go. But if you can stay, I hope you can stay. And if you have any comments about the training, I'd love to hear it, and you can send it to this email right there. Any kind of comments or any suggestions. And I also wanted to mention real quickly, we do have another training coming up next Thursday. It's Let's Get Social Media Strategies to Grow Your Club with Victoria Natoka, who is here tonight, actually. You can find the registration link in Starburst and on the D2 calendar. So if you need to go, goodbye, but we're going to continue. Take it away, Erin.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Getting back into this Q&A. Continue to drop your questions into the chat if you have them. But up next was a couple that were just right up back to back, not from the same person, but of the same mind. 5 is, how can we get a copy of this manual? And 6, are you selling copies? Maybe we could subscribe and pay for updates. So, Dad, we might have found our club funding. We'll talk about it. That was not something we had considered, but I am completely happy to share out this manual and assist your clubs as needed and getting you all set up. But
and I'm sure we could parlay some D2 dollars out of that too, right?
So let's see, we got, so that was me answering 5 and 6 all together. Okay, 7, it appears that you solved my brain just flipped. 7, it appears that you solved the technical issues by finding a space that has all the technology you need to have virtual meetings. If clubs don't have access to this kind of equipment due to location or cost, I was hoping you could tell us what technology we need to implement this. Dad, I'll leave that one to you first.
Thank you. I would say what matters in the space is the infrastructure, what is built in. And if there's not a projector that's built in, that's fine. Projectors are mobile. Projectors are portable. They also cost money though. But part of this plan going forward is a realistic assessment of what your club needs and what's the best way to provide it. If you have a club of 20 members and everybody chipped in $25 as a one-time technology allowance, you could get a very substantial projector. And you could go down to the Habitat for Humanity store and pick up a video screen, a projector screen. But what's going to matter is your access to the internet. If you can have hardwired internet where you're not falling prey to interference or limited bandwidth for Wi-Fi, that's one of the key issues. And if it's not there to begin with, and it's not functioning from the building owner, you're going to need to find other solutions, whether it's a different space, or perhaps you have members that can procure hotspots or cell-based internet. And again, this is in facilitating a hybrid club, being in person and online. If you're entirely in person, then the internet doesn't matter as much. But as a service to your members, you still need to help them learn how to give presentations in a digital world, be familiar with presentation technology and equipment. That's what's going to be critical. But in setting up a room for a hybrid club, chief among all is how big is that pipe of data coming to the room? And is it sufficient to support the number of online devices that you anticipate using? Everything else is doable either by donation or perhaps a one-time club technology assessment. These are all solvable items. And as I've noted, there's nothing wrong with bring your own device. Everybody, well, most people have a mobile device, whether it is a laptop, an iPad, a phone. All of these devices have internet access, a microphone, and a camera. And all of them have access to a Zoom app, a Teams app, Google Meet, or any other online platform that you find universal amongst your members.
I'll add to that, that ultimately, no matter what you do, it's not going to be without pain. You're going to struggle with this. You're going to fight the internet. You're going to fight a lack of technology. You're going to fight resistance to change, but that's part of it. Those moments where we struggled were where we got really innovative with figuring out how we were going to make this work. And once we had the commitment that no matter what, this is what we're going to do, things figured themselves out. Not without effort, not without us, but they got figured out.
And part of what you need to change as well are your club traditions. You're going to have resistance from that 89-year-old guy that doesn't believe in technology, doesn't want to participate through technology. But you'll also have the 92-year-old guy sitting next to him that technology is how they communicate with their grandkids. And they're fully on board with this wonderful thing called the internet. And you've got to find those champions in your club that will show the way. And I guess as a side comment, those are also the people that are going to head off the parking lot conversations of, well, I don't know why we're doing this. We've never done this before. We shouldn't be doing this now. Don't know why they're forcing this on us now. Those people that get it are going to be your champions, and they're going to be the informal and sometimes formal methods for leading the way.
Yep, absolutely. Now we have one more question that was submitted earlier on to the Q&A, and then we're going to open it up to the floor and other questions popping into the chat. So last up is, did you see membership drop or decline due to these changes? And we've said it a couple times over, but yes, we did. We had at least one member whose reason for dropping out of the club was they did not want to go hybrid. We had other dips and drops in membership as well throughout our time since then that didn't have to do with going hybrid, but still had to do with the accessibility of a 6:30 a.m. meeting on a Tuesday. So we definitely thought through, how can we keep those members too? We started recording our meetings so that we could publish them on YouTube so that people who weren't able to attend in person could still be a part of the experience in some way and report back that they had watched the meeting, that they were interacting, they had their votes, even though the awards were already cast. We found ways of still including them in the process. And I want to also add, because of going hybrid, our membership increased. Like my dad said, we reached distinguished club status. We got those 20 members. We had people joining who expressed that they had always wanted to do this, but could never find the time to go to a club in person, to not be there to cook dinner for their family or be there when their kids went to school. This gave them the opportunity, no matter where they were, no matter what they were doing, even if they could only log in to mute their mic, turn off their video, and just listen in as they were getting ready for their day, they could still be there. And that's ultimately who we were trying to reach. That is ultimately who we knew, no matter what dips or falls our membership might undertake in this transition, those are the people that we would attract and that we would help be a part of this experience, this transformational organization. So yes, we absolutely saw a member or two drop off because of this change, but we gained just as many, if not arguably more than that. I at least doubled the people that left versus the people that came in. So that was a really cool experience to see.
And I'll just throw in one more plug. We can always use more members.
Yes, we can.
Another 5 to 8 would be perfect.
Absolutely, everyone. All right, I'm going to open it up to the floor now. There were questions popping up in the chat, but Marty's been so patient with her hand up raised there. So I'm going to pass it over to you, my friend.
Thank you. I just wanted to share that I am currently taking a class. I'm a graduate student at UW, and our instructor is in France because of COVID. It is safer for them to be there than it is for them to be here because they're out in the country and able to sequester better. And it created a challenge for the university to incorporate his participation when there was a mandate for classes to be in person. And what we do is he zooms in, and each of us on our individual devices zoom in from our spots in the classroom. We mute our speakers and we have the microphones active so that he can hear the chatter. He can hear the comments that we might make that can't reach the PC that's sitting up front to show the PowerPoint presentation of his face. We do all of that individually participating. So this is the low or no tech method. Everyone has a smartphone in the class or a tablet or a laptop that they carry with them. They put it on independently right in front of themselves, and that way he has a view of everyone in the class. Everyone has a view of him. We can see the PowerPoint from the instructor who is also logged in, sharing their content, and we can see the remote instructor visually and hear everything that he has to say. So where there's a will, I want to echo what you said, there's a way. Creativity is necessary, and accommodation on the part of your members. They have to be really committed to make something like that work. But if the byproduct of that commitment is that more people are able to participate in the learning and training that we have in Toastmasters meetings, isn't that worth it? No matter what the naysayers say. Thank you.
Thank you,
Well
Marty.
said.
We think so. Awesome. I'm going to make a real quick plug here. If you do have a question you want to share audibly, please do what Marty did and use the raise your hand feature. It's something you will find in your Zoom toolbar under reactions. You'll have the option to, among all of these fun, cool emojis that you can play around with, raise your hand and lower your hand. So definitely check that out. Karen, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, actually, I have a question that Roger Draws put in the chat, which is when somebody is giving a presentation with, you know, a PowerPoint or whatever, how does that work?
We tested out a few different things when we were going hybrid, and ultimately, Dad, correct me if I'm wrong, but what we found was best was using whatever laptop was closest to the speaker to share the presentation as if the speaker was coming in remote. So even though they were standing at the podium, we still used one of those Zoom logins we had set up around the room to pull up and share screen, so that on the display, as you see here, that screen, it would be entirely the presentation. And that way, the people like me who were remote, there was still a camera trained on the speaker that we would pin, and we could still see the slide deck. We could still see the speaker, and everybody else in the room could do the same. That's what we went with, right, Dad?
Absolutely. Even if they were in person, they were presenting through Zoom, so that what was, and honestly, the benefit is what was being projected on the screen is the same that was being projected digitally to our virtual attendees. Everybody had the same viewing experience.
It's a great question. Thank you for sharing it. All right, Linda, I see your hand is up.
Oh, thank you. Two things. I just wanted to remind everybody, this is the perfectly ideal setup when all the equipment's right there in the room, but think it through that if your club has to buy equipment, that means it lives at some member's house. And what if that member can't make it to the meeting that night? So remember, you're going to have redundancy at some level, or someone's going to have to run over to somebody else's house and pick up the equipment. So it's a lot to ask for one person to be at every single meeting and to tote all the equipment in and all of that. And then my question is, can we have a copy of your handbook, and could we link to it from the YouTube channel that will contain this recording?
I wouldn't be opposed to that. What do you think, Dad?
That's absolutely fine with us.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, I like somebody's suggestion of a subscription plan earlier, since we do make continuous updates to this manual. Might be worth checking out. So another question we have in the chat: what criteria will you use to return to hybrid? And you know what? I'm gonna let Mr. President answer that one.
Honestly, what sets the first threshold is the state guidelines for in-person meetings, and working with the building owner as to whether or not they are comfortable with opening their building back up to the general public. Because ultimately, we are guests in their building, and they set the rules about how the space is to be used. And if they say the doors are locked, the doors are locked. But once the doors are open, then we'll start having that discussion about a return to in-person and hybrid meetings. We'll still follow state guidance and CDC guidelines about masking, social distancing, any sort of vaccination requirements. we fully recognize the background of what's caused the need to shut down the building, but we don't intend for that to become an ongoing debate within the club. It just is. And once it isn't, then we'll move forward appropriately.
I do want to add to that. We do recognize that even with the success we found in going hybrid, even in the smoother transition we had going remote than many other clubs experienced at the start of the pandemic, we do miss seeing each other in person. We do miss sharing physical space and benefiting from the energy and wisdom everyone has to offer simply by sitting next to each other. So we have every intention of going back to that hybrid format where the people that can are in person and the people that can't, like me over here in Kansas City, can still join in regardless of where we are. But like my dad said, we'll be doing so safely and when the time is right. We're not going to rush it because we are set up well to continue doing what we're doing and thrive in it. So we're not altogether worried about when that's going to happen. It's just a matter of waiting for the right moment.
You know, the one thing that I would add that is actually better, as it seems to be better in a full online setting as opposed to hybrid, is socialization. Our meetings open at 6:30, but the meeting doesn't start until 6:45, and then it's over in an hour, which was part of my draw to joining this club. Is meeting's over at 7:45, and then I can go on about my day. But what we learned when we went hybrid was there was essentially an in-person click and an online grouping. And it's easy to fall into that social trap of only interacting with the people who are in the same type of space that you're in. The people in the room only talk to each other typically during that social time. And the people who were online, because they had direct access to speakers and microphone, kind of chatted amongst themselves. It's kind of an awkward transition, and honestly something we're still trying to figure out how to have hybrid social time during that in-person Poppe, have that moment that Erin was talking about of having coffee and pastries. It's a little hard to share that with people that are online. And we need to figure out how to include both online and in-person attendees in that social time.
Last thing I'll say to that is I think right before the pandemic made us go to completely remote, we were just on the cusp of figuring that out naturally. I remember making note that more people were just coming up to the laptops during that 15-minute coffee and chat time just to say, hey, Erin, how's it going in Kansas City? What's the weather like? And it was so fun just to watch people wander up to the various laptops to have a face-to-screen conversation. And full well knowing too that regardless of if they were watching me on that little laptop, I was appearing to talk back to them on the monster Oz screen behind everyone. So that was something to keep in mind. But I do think we were naturally getting to a place of figuring out that integration of online to in-person interaction, but it's going to take some intentional readjustment when we return to that format. And with that, I think we have answered all of the questions that have been dropped into the chat. If anyone has any others, please feel free to raise your hand so we can unmute you. But if you are good, so are we, I think, right, Dad? Anything else to say?
I think we've covered any and all.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much. Brian, why don't you stop
good.
sharing so that we can see everybody and see if there's anything else anybody say?
Great. Karen, will you be sending the YouTube link when it's ready? Will you send it to everybody that registered for tonight? Is that something you normally do?
I don't have a normal yet. I
Oh.
can. I can.
That
Yeah,
would be great.
I think that would be good. And also, yeah, maybe
They'll
there's a way.
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
here's the recording. Yep. And
And we can
anybody
make-
who didn't register can still go to the D2 YouTube and look at all the recordings for all the trainings that we've had.
Yeah,
And we can make a PDF out of our manual and get that over to you as well, Karen.
that's great. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Anything else?
I just like to say we really appreciate the work that you all have done to share your experiences with us, and was a marvelous presentation. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
You, Hector.
Absolutely. You guys did a really lovely job. Truly.
And are you being evaluated?
Yes,
I
they
know I
are.
am. Are you, Doug?
Well, Erin and I, just naturally evaluate each other.
Every day.
Well, you still have time, Brian, if you want to be evaluated.
I definitely would. That was kind of my one failing in setting up for this, was trying to pick the speech project that this would be associated with.
Just send me the evaluation form when you decide.
Will do.
All right. Oh, Neha, you have your hand up?
Hi. Yeah, is it possible to have a platform like where we have email IDs or contact information of Erin and Brian so that people can reach out to them if they have any questions while they are setting up for the hybrid meeting?
We can add our contact information into that digital meeting manual that we'll deliver out in the PDF, but Karen, you're also welcome to send out our club emails and contact information in that. email.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank
I'll do
you.
that. I'll do that.
Thanks.
Right. And we are set up through Free Toast Toast. So you can always email us through those aliases as well.
And come check out our club. 6:30 Tuesday mornings. We can drop the Zoom link as well. Come be a guest. We'd love to have you.
Absolutely.
I can stay in my robe, maybe so.
You guys are
Wouldn't have it any
earlier,
other way.
you guys are earlier risers than early opinions in Mukilteo. We don't start till 7:15 on Wednesday.
Hackers.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you all.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.